Thank you to everyone who's already supporting us on Patreon. We've been pleasantly surprised by how many people were able to support the podcast, given we've only been going a couple of months. We are going to come back in September, but we can't continue indefinitely unless we get more supporters. So please visit patreon.com and support the podcast today.
As socialists, we believe in that great Marxist principle, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. And that's reflected in the 3 levels of support we've created, because we can't speak to your ability, but we can speak to our need. We're going to need you to put your money where your ears are. We have 3 packages. The Wokerati package, £3 a month plus VAT. The Prosecco Socialist, £10 a month plus VAT. And the Ultimate Comrade, £50 a month plus VAT. Bearing in mind, you don't have to be a socialist to contribute. You just have to appreciate what we're doing. All of the packages include over the top, under the radar weekly bonus episode, access to the WhatsApp private community. We had a great night on election night with our WhatsApp community. Carys and I were in there all the way through the night, and the weekly newsletter. Prosecco Socialist, £10 a month, and the Ultimate Comrade, £50 a month, also include first to know about live and in-person events. So, if you have the money and you are enjoying this podcast, please, if you can, do.
Big news, we're doing our first ever over-the-top, under-the-radar live event in September.
Spend the evening with us and a special guest in London from 7 o'clock as part of London Podcast Festival. For all of you outside London, if this goes well, hopefully we will do other events.
If you want to get tickets, you can visit kingsplace.co.uk for more information, but we'll also pin the link to our social media channels and in the show notes.
Have some fun. It will be a great event. It will also be our first event, making history.
Want to support us? Come along. We'd love to see you.
The event will be at King's Place, which is just up the road from King's Cross in London, part of a building that was my old workplace at The Guardian.
5th of September, lots of places for socialist snacks. It's an evening event. Gary, Carys, please come along.
Hi, I'm Gary Young.
And I'm Carys and this is Over the Top, Under the Radar.
This week we're speaking with the author of the multi-award-winning book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, Reni Eddo-Lodge. Hey Reni, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm so excited to be here today.
We're excited to have you.
Two people who I hold in much high regard.
Oh, well, thank you.
Right back at you.
Back at you.
Yeah.
Likewise. I wanted to ask you, where did you get your politics
Good question.
from? Was it your folks? Was it your upbringing? Was it in the air? Was it in the water?
They do put socialism in the water now.
They do? Well, they should.
They should.
They
put
should.
it in the water, Thames, not all this poo.
Yeah.
Oh, God's
Yeah.
sake.
I have a story about being really young, like under the age of 5, and trying to give away my McDonald's Happy Meal to somebody who was unhoused and being heavily chastised. And I was like...
Who were you chastised by?
My mother, of course.
Okay.
I was like, but like, we've got food at home. So maybe we could say that it was dyed in the wall. Maybe there's theories that I'm neurodivergent. I do have a strong sense of justice. I don't know. It hasn't been diagnosed. But also I think like maybe it's just being informed by somebody who grew up in the inner city.
Where did you grow up?
Well, part of it was in southeast London, Woolwich, and then part of it was in Tottenham.
Okay, also
Say
good.
up in Tottenham. North.
Up north. Up north.
Woolwich.
That's what we Londoners call up
Yeah.
north, Gary. Tottenham or
I know.
Edmonton.
And you're all very sad. We don't have to broadcast this if you're awkward about it, but can I ask, how old are you?
I'm 34. We can broadcast that.
Okay, so
it's public
34.
information.
So
were you
what
Iraq
year
War?
did you leave school?
Yeah, like Iraq War. Would you remember that? Because that for
Nah.
me I was like 16 when the Iraq War was kicking off. Those were the first demos I went on.
No.
Not with my mother.
I have a theory. I did an article for New Statesman called Generation Grime. So you're born in 89.
Mm-hmm.
You would have been 18, 19 when the Tories...
Yeah, I was in uni.
I mean, obviously you were 5 when you did the McDonald's thing, but it's still a somewhat formative age when austerity, hiking tuition fees. You would have grown up all through Iraq War. Black Lives Matter would already have started to be a thing. That there is some kind of generational inculcation. When I think of Stormzy, Mary Black, Zara Sultana, they were all within that cohort. I think Stormzy might be 1 or 2 years older than you. But like, when I asked him where he got his politics from, when I interviewed him the first time, and he was like, I don't know. But then when I looked at the point at which he was growing up, I think he was kind of in his teens for austerity, old enough to see things being taken away that you had, and to see the fabric of your future being eradicated. Now I'm old-splaining. So what I'm trying to do is suggest some of where your politics might have come from.
Yeah, definitely. I think grime's a good way to measure it because, of course, that was a very anti-establishment music genre that was like constantly under threat by the state. An anthem that I grew up with was So Solid, Cruise, 21 Seconds. Whenever anybody asks me to talk about music, I always talk about it. And I remember how they were like, as musicians, like constantly threatened by the state, heavily demonized by the press. Well, that wasn't grime, that was garage. But I think there's a lot of people who grew up in the inner city who like, you know, was excited and enthused by what at the time was called multiculturalism, fusions of cultures, amazing, interesting culture coming out of essentially places in the country that politicians had almost completely written off. And to see that culture denigrated and considered a social problem, particularly when it sprung out of very little, you know?
Yeah, well, I think I'm a little bit older than you and I don't fall into Gary's generation grime, but I remember Channel U, Dizzy Rascal, Wiley, and for the first time growing up in Brixton in social housing, so in a working class community and also like quite a mixed community in terms of class, in terms of race. But I remember like, I didn't know Dizzy Rascal, but like I knew people who lived on his estate or like someone knew someone who'd hung out with Wiley or bought weed from so-and-so or done whatever. And like lyrics that were from consuming a lot of African-American culture, a lot of Jay-Z, a lot of Nas, to suddenly like someone who's got a lyric that's like, I'm proper old school, like Happy Shopper, and being like, there's literally a Happy Shopper down the street. So that, but I think there's a couple of waves of it because there's the Tory cuts, but then there's the Asbo era of Blair. And so I guess, I don't know, do you remember being, I guess we're asking a similar thing, like, because I know you were involved in politics as a student. Was there a point or an issue or a thing that really got you engaged, like switched you on, or was it just always there? You're just always like, this isn't right. The world isn't working how it should be.
I was explaining to somebody the other day that a large galvanizing factor was hitting puberty, being really badly sexually harassed. Like I hit puberty early. I was very badly sexually harassed, like throughout my teens. That radicalized me. Can I swear?
Yeah.
That shit radicalized me. That shit radicalized me. By the time I was 19, so like I was like, harassment. I'm very into my feminism now. Like that's what took me to feminism.
Yeah.
And then when I was at uni, you know, there was all the stuff around the tuition fees. We had the Conservative and Lib Dem coalition. I also threw myself into that. So, you know, I think I've always had a general sense of a strong distaste for what I perceive to be unfair. But I think like being badly sexually harassed by grown adult men when I was a teenager going to and from school, like the rage.
Yeah.
It's never really left me. And then, you know, being involved in like student protest as well.
And what was that like? So I went on a lot of demos when I was 15, 16 about the Iraq War, and I felt very defeated by that because I was on the streets with millions of people and we still bombed Iraq and like killed loads of people. Like, what was your experience of doing that, organising around tuition fees or around Tory cuts?
I remember going on the demos, the big one that the National Union of Students organised. NUS were great about that, actually. They worked with student unions across the country, got loads of people on coaches down. Then I remember heading back up to where I was studying, and there was like hundreds of us that went down.
Where were you studying?
I was studying in a city called Preston in the northwest of England. I was there for like 4 years, ended up sticking around in the student movement, was elected student union president. And I remember when we returned back from the demo, like we were like all affronted by this media coverage of, let's say, the worst behaviour. A lot of people wrote us off and were like quite hostile towards us. And that's when I realized, oh, okay, let me start quickly losing my faith in the press. Like, let me start quickly losing my faith in like media narratives, because it's becoming evident to me that sometimes standing up for what I believe in, which I don't think was a radical proposition.
Nope.
Like, don't triple tuition fees, is going to actually have you demonized. So I learned that at like age 20. But I was writing the other day and I was really thinking about how like Black Lives Matter has really bookended my career, you know, from the murder of Trayvon Martin in like 2012. And then, you know, what happened with my work in 2020. The murder of Trayvon Martin, which I guess I'll just explain for your listeners in case they don't know, but he was like a teenager who was murdered in the States, of course, walking home with some Skittles and like a soft drink. And,
iced tea.
Yeah, and he was deemed a threat by a man called George Zimmerman and shot him after they had a like little altercation.
Zimmerman was like a have a go Harry. He sees him, he assumes it's a gated community, he assumes that he's a criminal, he chases him. And there's basically no way that Trayvon Martin gets home that night. Either he gets hunted down by Zimmerman or he fights back. But what he's not allowed to do is go to the shops, get his Skittles, get his iced tea and walk home. Zimmerman stops him. They get into a tussle. Zimmerman shoots him.
Yeah, it was probably the first spark of the BLM movement.
Yeah.
And interestingly, it wasn't a police killing. It was a vigilante killing.
I think that was a formative moment for the global Black Lives Matter movement. And that was something that really moved me. I remember writing about it on my blog at the time. You know, so I kind of see myself as part of a generation that is really like comfortable and used to protest. We watched infrastructure crumble when the Conservatives, I know it was a coalition government, but it was basically a Conservative government, elected right at the beginning of my adulthood. And I've watched the social safety nets and, you know, social housing just be completely dismantled. I still live in London. I don't live far from where I grew up. Everything is worse. And post-election, I was saying to my friend, I feel like the student movement is literally like the Bullingdon Club of the left. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Good analogy. It's not wrong.
If you're not, pay attention to whoever's involved, because you'll be hearing from those people in 10, 15 years, including me. I was actually one of the people.
You're saying you're a member of the Bullingdon Club of the Left.
I am. And I think my ascent was unusually early for somebody involved in the student movement, because I was grabbing headlines maybe 5-6 years after I finished. Usually you hear from people a decade after they've been involved in the student movement, the ones who go off to be Labour MPs, of course.
As soon as they get that seat.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they're usually just like dutifully hanging around the party, being
jobs
good and
stuff.
obedient and stuff.
Yeah.
And to be fair, some people who came out of that are good, right?
They are good. I'm not dissing them.
Well, hang on. A lot of them aren't. Most of them
are. I think it's just a statement of fact. And I think it's just something we have to be mindful of, especially in Labour, because we've spoken about this. I think the party culture is very conservative and very biased toward insiders. And like almost regardless of your politics in Labour, it's a bit like, well, if we can't place you, if you're not known to us, you know, you're in this faction and you came up doing this, I think that is quite threatening and challenging to Labour. So yeah, I think you can be an amazing left-wing Labour MP and have come up through student movement NUS. You can be a Blairite. But the fact that now the trade union movement is much less of a feeder for Labour than the student movement, I think it's just something for us to be mindful of as we try and understand and navigate politics and the media. And I would say this batch of MPs, I was like, oh, wow, I sort of know, like as in follow on Instagram or Facebook, a lot of MPs. And same with political journalists. And that's a pretty small pool for everyone to be swimming in.
And of course, you know, the fact that the Labour Party does seem to draw so heavily on the student movement rather than the trade union movement has huge class implications, because we're talking about graduates here. It sort of does link into that tuition fees conversation, doesn't it? Because one of the reasons that we were all sort of hitting the streets back in like 2010 was this is going to have huge class implications on who's going to decide to want to take on that debt. People who don't want to take on debt for various reasons, even though we heard all of this stuff from Conservative MPs about how you'll never pay it off anyway, like they're more likely to be working class. Yeah. So, yeah, it has huge implications for what the parliamentary Labour Party looks like in the future if they keep drawing from that pool.
And you talked about as a self-identified member of the Bullingdon Club of the Left, like when your ascent and blowing up. Do you want to talk us through a bit? What was that like and what did it feel like?
Well, I must say that there were like efforts to pull me into Labour students.
They tried
People
to
did come to Preston to
grab
visit
you.
me and have lunch.
Did
Oh
they?
my- really?
They did.
People did the pilgrimage
From
to
where?
Preston. I love
Hang
this.
on, where did
Probably-
they come to Preston
I'm
from?
not quite sure where they were based, but
Sussex,
it was not
Oxford,
there.
Cambridge.
Right. Yeah, because if you went to Preston from Manchester, that's not like
No,
Yeah.
I don't think they were Manchester based.
I like to think they came from London or they came from somewhere in the south and they're like getting the map out. Preston. She's
This
in
is
Preston.
some serious deep state shit.
Yeah,
this
well,
is
it's
people
always like Granta. It's like they
Yeah.
were maybe, I know it wasn't West Streeting because you weren't contemporaries, but like it's like a sort of a West Streeting figure
Yeah.
making the pilgrimage to Preston to be like, Reni, join Labour
30 under
students.
30.
Join us.
There were
join
efforts
us.
to get me to go on trips and have lunch with people. And I think, what I will say for Labour students is that they're not bad talent spotters. Do you know what I mean?
No,
Like,
I'm kind
they'll
of
try and bring
impressed.
people
So
in.
this is
But
going
I
a
was
bit
like,
against my
I'll eat the
theory.
lunches, guys, but I don't want to be involved.
You're like, are you getting the lunch? Okay, yeah.
See, because they were trying to
Delicious.
kick
Because
me
I was
out.
broke.
Yeah, I'm like, this is not, I was like, they were
Yeah.
talent spotting her. I was like, there's a lot of purging when I was
Yeah,
involved. A lot of
yeah, I
purging.
know,
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
What
I've
was
always
the
been a bit
pitch?
circumspect because I didn't align myself too heavily with the left, like
Right.
the student
hard
left
left.
either,
Yeah.
because very stressful bunch.
Yeah, it can be bad vibes.
Always shouting. I'm very sensitive. I'm very sensitive.
You're caught between the lunching Labour students and then the hard left who you're like, you're because you're yelling a bit
That
much.
sounded so auntie, like always shouting.
Honestly,
Oh,
shouting.
it's my ears.
I'm really
My ears.
sensitive, so I don't need. Can everybody just talk in like normal, quiet voices, please?
Okay, so,
So
you were
two
caught in the
shouty
middle.
crackers.
They
Were the lunches good?
were all right.
Okay,
But
it wasn't
yeah.
like a Greg's. It was like a sit
No, it
down.
wasn't a Greg's. Also, I was broke at the time, so I was happy to have some free food.
Never turned down the free lunch.
But I didn't succumb to, some could call it pressure, others could call it the gentle invitation. So when I sort of like threw myself into feminism and journalism and trying to make it as a writer and journalist and eventually author, I think I'm taking the hat of critic now as well. I was doing that unsupported by any organisation, but I ended up trying to be a freelance journalist, and I didn't train as a journalist, so this was something that I really learnt on the job with some brilliant editors over the years. Always tried to keep race and racism and kind of like structural inequality in what I was like thinking about reporting on. Like there was more publicly available writing that I did that was strictly comment, and I think like when you're a young writer and journalist, people are like, oh, what do you know? You're out here commentating on the world, you don't know anything about it. But I also did some like really great meaty interesting features for a publication called Inside Housing, which is all about social housing, and like worked with an editor who I'd met through feminism who really like was so amazing and supportive. And I was still being involved in activism and writing on my little blog and like pushing it out to the world via Twitter, as it was called then, and getting involved in conversations about feminism online, some of which became increasingly hostile as the women who were, I guess, the biggest voices in that space were kind of just annoyed about feeling criticized, feeling they were also receiving lots of unfair criticism. The more I got involved in these activities that I think ostensibly good people were putting lots of time and energy and were probably like completely underpaid or doing it voluntarily. But when people are doing that at the nth degree of their capacity, they sometimes are not very thoughtful about what we would now understand to be inclusivity. There was just like far too many times when there was like something a bit microaggression happening in those spaces.
Yeah, I think that was what struck me as
And
someone who was like a watcher or a lurker in those conversations, just how, and I think you often bore the brunt of it, how these sort of white middle class feminists brought the same vim and upset and hurt at critique from within the feminist community that they would have as if it was a man trolling them. And
Yeah,
it felt like
absolutely.
it was the same response either way. How dare you?
Did they even see it as within the feminist community?
I'm not sure. I think at the time when we were having these like big, open, public conversations about like feminism, what it involves, who it includes, me and other Black British women kind of just see them as like unwelcome interlopers. I don't harbour any resentment about this now. I've left all of those people in the dust. You know, like...
There was
Eat my dust,
yeah,
bitches.
yeah. The mic's attached, so she can't drop it. But she left you in the dust.
I would say though, like I actually don't. I resist and resent the idea that white women get to define feminism and say we're not in it. Like we are in the feminist community.
No, I was saying, do they even consider you as being in it? Not.
Well, I think that is where part of the reaction comes from. A bit of a like.
Yeah, exactly.
Who are you here? It's like, I don't need to be invited. I'm here. It's not your party. You're not organising the party. Like, we're here. We've been here. I found observing that stuff, like, really upsetting. And I guess, like, the direction social media has gone in, like, maybe that's now less surprising. But I remember at the time feeling quite hurt and quite wounded, like, on your behalf, on others' behalf. Sometimes they get a little bit teary.
Oh, yeah, they love to cry.
And then you're the mean black woman who's like made them cry.
Absolutely.
And then they'll be like, well, I was raised by a single mother. And you're like, it wasn't really, I was also, but that wasn't really. And that kind of, shutting down of spaces that felt very exciting and full of potential.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you were interested in like transforming the world and making a fairer society for women, it was very disappointing and distressing to be like, oh, the same people are saying, men, you need to shape up in these ways, like aren't really open to feedback of shaping up.
You wrote a book about getting white people to shape up, or about race more broadly. How was that experience then? The first chapter that I sat down and wrote was about feminism and British feminism. And I often hear, because a lot of my readers are women, I would think most of my readers are women, and a lot of them are white women. I often hear that was a chapter that really resonated with them in a big way. So there was a overlap from like pulling away from that British feminist activist space, basically feeling a bit despondent because I was like, okay, well, all of my like revolutionary energy can't go here because there's just such hostility to like the basic question of who's included. That was the first chapter I wrote. It was really difficult for me to write. It took me a year to write it. But consistently, what I heard post-publication from white British women in particular was like that really resonated with them. You know, the scales fell from their eyes, etc., etc. And I think that there was a time where, like, I wanted to settle a score, but then I realised, you know, it doesn't really matter. That's very evolved of you. I'm a big score setter, so I like that. You're a bit like, that's like a zen.
Yeah.
It's many things in me.
I mean...
Maybe also the Welsh.
Yeah,
we love a grudge. We love a grudge.
I think that it didn't matter to me because that all of those arguments in British feminism, it was like, well, there's a broader problem here and it's actually nothing to do with the individual people. The broader problem is that, like, in Britain, there is a cultural attitude that, like, racism doesn't really exist here. We don't need to be addressing these matters here. And so,
it's like
and all of these people who I would felt disappointed by and felt hostility from, they were informed by that too. So I was like, well, there's actually a bigger problem here, and I would like to use my writing to try and redress it.
I just wonder, because reading, say, Audre Lorde or Nikki Giovanni, Angela Davis, obviously they're all American, but go to Germany and Maya Ayim or Peggy Pisha or any, like, this seems each place will do its racism and the racism within the feminist movement differently, but each place does it in a way that there are a group of white feminists, if you're talking about a place where people of colour are in a minority, that imagines people of colour out of their story. And I'm wondering what is specific to Britain about that. I'm throwing that open to the class.
Okay.
Are you teaching the class?
I'm
on feminism?
Yes.
Mansplaining feminism.
I'm not mansplaining feminism.
I'm teasing you.
Well, I think what's different about Britain is Britain's cultural understanding of what it means to deal with conflict. I'm West African. I come from a culture where, like,
gang.
all problems are out on the table.
Air it.
I grew up hearing family arguments shouted down the phone. I don't know if they ever got to any point of resolution, but the arguments were being had. And I just think that, like, Britain's understanding of, like, conflict resolution is really just passive aggression, unhealthy levels of repression, and rank closing.
Can I add excessive use of the word fine and going really red in the face but saying nothing?
Exactly.
Fine meaning what? It's fine.
It's fine. Whereas, in a Ghanaian context, I can't speak for all of West Africa, though I wish I could. No one's going to be saying it's fine. They'll be like, what's happened?
If people aren't happy with you, they'll let you know.
Your younger brother. I've heard from your senior brother
exactly.
that you've been... There's no... And everyone's chatting about everyone's business.
If people aren't happy with you, they'll let you know.
Fully.
Like, that's what I grew up around. I've got the incredible privilege of being able to travel extensively with my book. And so, you know, coming back to Britain each time, and I do consider Britain to be my home, the cultural differences are like always thrown into sharp relief. And I think that level of poor conflict resolution is really just like baked into British identity. Even those of us who, you know, identify with other countries but live here, like we can be guilty of it. I really feel like quite committed to pursuing emotional honesty in my life and work now, simply because I just can't really operate in any other way. And I also kind of think that, like, when you're a writer, particularly in Britain, like, the British crave emotional honesty, man. They need it. Because they ain't doing it day to day.
This is the thing about when British people cry. It's like they need the release.
Exactly,
it's like, that's when people get so emotional about
people
the football.
Leaning on alcohol.
You're allowed.
You know, I prefer emotional dishonesty.
Are you on a different team to us?
So I think I am on emotional lie.
Stiff upper lip.
When people are emotionally honest, sometimes it's like, oh man, now I've got to deal with that. Yeah.
You did live in America for over a decade, though, who I feel are on another end of the spectrum.
They play different sports.
They got some, maybe you got,
there.
yeah.
I think might just be a very British thing about me.
Yeah. Well, you are a different generation, Gary. You did
I'm also old.
I'm interested in, so we've talked about the book. I mean, the book's great. If people haven't read it,
everybody's read it.
If you haven't read it, read it.
The book's famous at this point.
It's a bestseller. It's a bestseller, and it's been translated into many languages. A lot of your life's been lived online, and a lot of the success, not all, but a lot of the success of your book was also driven by social media, and there was this sort of famous people or other people taking selfies with your book, so beautiful cover. Like, what's your relationship with social media? Like, if you don't mind sharing, like, how much time do you spend on these platforms?
Always lurking.
You're a lurker. Okay.
I'm always lurking. I like to know what the people are talking about.
Yeah.
I like to be engaged.
Yeah.
I don't post on TikTok, but I'm watching it.
Oh, you on TikTok? Okay.
I want to know what the conversations. I kind of feel that's my job as a writer.
And you like being on it. You don't find it stressful. Like,
I'm not participating. I'm just watching. So it's not stressful when you're just watching.
You should just lurk.
I'm lurking. Literally, the traditional.
This is an actionable conversation.
Instagram can stress me out, even if I'm just lurking. Everyone's life is so perfect. Stressful. Everyone's happy. The children are beautiful. They go on these nice holidays. They cook food and they look
I don't
good.
believe any of that stuff.
I mean, I know a part of my brain knows it's a lie, but the other part of my brain is fix up.
Because I think, like, when I choose to post on Instagram, because I have a blue tick account, like, I'm highly selective about what I choose to post. So I know other people are too. So I don't really post on social media anymore. I really feel like when it comes to, like, sharing myself on social media, I've done my time. That's how I feel. You know, I still have my political beliefs. I still hold them dear. I still love to write. I see that there's people younger than me taking on that baton. I see them on X. I see them on Instagram. I say, you go, kids.
Yeah, but don't you worry
it's not
about
gonna be
them
me
as well? Like, I guess I feel
they need to learn their own lessons. They do. Just like I needed to.
There is a curious thing, which would be, you write a book, as you've done, which is a reasonably anonymous thing. It's not like being on the telly. You write a book because you want to write a book and you want people to read it, but you don't necessarily bargain for being a public figure, which is a different thing altogether, I think. And beyond what just writing a book is, and particularly because of social media, you can become very public very quickly. So the days when you would have to be on telly, like I remember, this is a name drop, but for a reason. I interviewed Warren Beatty. He told me about being in Russia and going into a bar or a restaurant with a great Russian poet called Yevgeny Yevtushenko. And everybody said there was this big buzz. Because somehow the people knew there was a famous person in the room. And Warren Beatty said, what are they talking? And the guy, and Yevgeny Yevtushenko says, they think you're me. Because there weren't that many tellies in the Soviet Union. I hadn't seen him. He's a poet. But we're now a place where people can and will stop you in the street and say, hey, Reni, you know, and you don't know what's coming after that. I read your book. I think you suck. I really like your work. You know, I've told the story to you, certainly, of a woman stopping me in Hackney and saying, "You Gary Young, isn't it?" And I said, yeah. And he said, "I read your book." And I said, "Oh, get my face ready, you know, for like," and she said, "Yeah, I didn't like it." And I was like, "Okay." And she goes, "Yeah, I didn't know where you were coming from." I said, "Oh, yeah, fair enough." Yeah. She said, "Anyway, I saw you and I thought I should say something." And I, you know,
she's a black woman, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I wasn't upset, but I was on my way to Nando's, you know, and then
just wanted your lemon and herb.
Yeah.
Sorry.
He's rightly been insulted there.
I'm from Stevenage, but less with the lemon and herb.
Medium, hot.
Medium.
Yeah, medium. That's respectable.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And again, I would just say, if you are the woman that approached Gary on the street to tell him you didn't like his book, please write in. We want
you on the show.
We want you on the show.
Well,
we love your energy.
I want to
You're
read
a
your
queen.
books.
You know, becoming famous is a process of severe objectification, essentially. If you write about ideas, then people literally just see you as the physical embodiment of them. And I know a little bit about objectification growing up as a girl and being a woman, but I wasn't quite anticipating, I think, when I was like, in the run-up to publishing this book, I didn't expect to be as objectified as I would be. I absolutely hated being famous. I hated it so much.
So hated like you were famous.
Say a bit more
I'm
about
established now. I'm not famous. Like
what's
people,
the difference?
that. Yeah, tell us
people
what you mean.
know my work, but I walk the streets unmolested daily. I catch the bus. I'm on the tube.
Okay. But there was a
out
period
here. Nobody
when,
knows who I am.
Was there a period when that wasn't the case?
There was maybe like 3 to 4 years where like every time I left the house, I live, I'm not going to say where, I'll just say the Victoria line.
You live in London on the Victoria line.
Exactly. Like I live where my readers live. And to some extent, like that's a success because these are the people who I want to be reading my work. These are people who probably are my peers and probably even adjacent to my networks. Incredible, amazing. I remember speaking to somebody at a literary festival in India and I was telling them that was happening to me. They're like, "Oh yeah, that happened to Zadie Smith too." Like, and I was like, wow, okay, incredible, amazing feat. But also like, I'm not really one for wanting to be the center of attention. I'm a writer, I'm a journalist. I like to observe, you know? So I really felt for a while like I'd lost my anonymity, like I'd sold my face. And I often, you know, I had to do some deep thinking about, okay, why did that happen to me? Because I was naive pre-publication. Nobody knows if a book's going to be a bestseller or not. So nobody's going to warn you. But I was a 27-year-old young black woman from London. And I kind of thought, okay, I'm going to be received as like a serious political thinker. Ultimately, time has shown that I am somebody who's respected as a serious political thinker now, but the attention initially that the book got was informed by me being young, being a woman, and I hate to bring it to this, guys. I hate to have to bring it to this, but also I think it was the way I look. And I think, you know, there was ways in which like, there was images of me out there and I was like hauled in for photo shoots. I'm not complaining. These are things that's so important for a debut author to be participating in. No publicist is going to tell you not to do it. But like, I was like, this feels like a high proportion of my image of my face out there in a way that I didn't anticipate, but I participated anyway. And
it's also a very new thing, right? Like, you know, Gary won the Orwell Prize. Like there aren't that many pictures of George Orwell or Simone de Beauvoir. This kind of image driven society is new. It wasn't always the case. The writers had to be photographed. And there is a specific thing that happens for women and for young women in terms of how they're objectified and commodified.
Exactly.
So you felt that was a big part of how you had to promote the book. Like
it was
face.
Undoubtedly, the book became me. I looked a particular way. I had my hair out. That was kind of like a visual signature. Those things really became interchangeable. And that became clear to me when people come up to me in the street crying. And as somebody who, you know, writing is very much a behind the scenes kind of job, I was kind of shocked by that. I always think I did a little bit too much press. My publisher will never agree with me on that.
No such thing.
Like,
unfortunately, says a PR person.
But you don't know at the time that it's going to be a bestseller, right? So you're out there, you're hawking your wares. You are doing what you need. You write a book, you want people to read it. people who work in the industry say, well, then this is what you have to do. So then the thing is that then when it blows up, all of that stuff is amplified and magnified. But you're doing what pretty much, with a handful of exceptions, Elena Ferrante being one, like there are some people who are like, just don't fucking talk to me. I don't want to be known. But with a handful of exceptions, people promote their books. I promote my books.
Absolutely. But I think that there were societal forces around me being young and a woman that like created a bit of a public excitement about me that like, I think you see it happen every now and then with like young political women. It probably wasn't on the same scale, but something like AOC over in New York, like there was that hysteria around her as well. I don't know if hysteria is a bit of a sexist word, but there was suddenly just like intense
there's an excitement,
interest.
There's a lot of projection onto the person. And also, like, you know, you mentioned Zadie Smith, like, you're not writing fiction and you're interweaving it with your personal story. So then people feel maybe that they know you or they have a connection with you or that you represent them. And I think it's more acute. I mean, we can just see it, like women are objectified more.
Absolutely. You don't actually have to be a woman who takes your clothes off in public to be objectified.
Nope.
By the general public. And of course, it's so amazing and incredible that people felt heard through my work, particularly women, particularly like other young women of colour, like incredible, amazing.
You've said and communicated a huge amount of gratitude for the success. You also said you hated being famous. Like, why did you hate it?
I didn't have the infrastructure in my life to cut myself off from the general public. Like actual famous people do.
Like, you didn't have, so Beyonce has a jewels of security guard. Yeah, you didn't, and also like you don't have. I'm assuming you didn't have like a team around you of like, you know, when the book first came out. I'm guessing you didn't have someone who can read all your emails, someone who can say, "I'll do your social." Like, don't look at it. I'll delete the bad comments. I have done this for various people, but one of the things you do as a PR person is you're the interface with the journalist. You're the one who says, "We absolutely have to end now," or "Please don't ask that question." And part of when you're a comms person or a PR person is you're a buffer between a celebrity, a politician, a company and the journalist to just allow the other person to have a bit of breathing space and like not be the one to say, actually, I need to leave now. This interview's run long and you've asked me a lot of rude questions. I'm guessing you didn't have that when the book first came out. It was just you.
I worked with a brilliant publicist. I was like the last big book that she worked on before she went back to New Zealand. She was great. I love her. And she was always brilliant. But at the end of the day, you know, people in publishing move jobs. I didn't have much of a buffer. I didn't come from a background where like, this is a job that people do. So nobody said, this is the infrastructure you need. And I lost my personal life for a bit. And I was so busy all the time. I don't think I had the support I needed around me. And there were some people around me who were really supportive, but, you know, they've got their own lives. I've built all of that support now.
If it's not too onerous a question, Reni, before we wrap up, what are you working on now?
I am back in my journalism bag.
Okay.
And really enjoying it. After a bit of an extended break because of things that we've discussed. And I was quite overwhelmed by it all. And there was a point where it felt like I was the book and the book was me. I was trying to separate it. And it was getting in the way of wanting to do journalism, by the way, because you can't be like behind the scenes and observing if everybody knows who you are. To some extent, like it opens amazing doors, but in other ways, like people are acting weird around you.
Yeah, well, it's like the food critics that there are a few that try and stay anonymous because otherwise it's like you rock up at the restaurant.
Exactly.
Get the good plates out.
But I'm doing some culture journalism at the minute, which I'm really enjoying. I just love reveling in creative excellence, thinking about politics. I feel so lucky. This is my dream job. And even though like I've spoken a little bit about some of the difficulties of it, like, wow, like I'm very grateful to younger me. She grafted because now I can really do the work. I mean, I did the work that I really wanted to do at the time. I really wanted to change everyone's minds about racism. I changed maybe 40% of the country's minds on racism. I did. And I'm like, okay.
40% is good. That's
exactly.
That is twice as much as the Labour's share of the eligible vote.
Doing better than Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
So I feel really...
You're worth 2 Starmers.
Feel good about it.
Thank you. I'm so proud of younger me for the graft. And now it's like I'm allowed to go at a slightly slower pace.
Are you soft life? Are you team soft life?
I wish I could be, but it's hard in this city.
Yeah, it's hard to be soft life in London. Okay, but so that means everyone, thank you, Reni, for coming on.
Thank
if you want to hear more about what Reni's up to next, follow her on social media. She won't post a lot, but she'll keep you in the loop.
I'll post my work.
Yeah.
And maybe beautiful nature scenes.
nature.
Yeah.
Exciting, thoughtful work.
Mm-hmm.
Good reason to follow her.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Reni.
Thanks for listening to Over the Top, Under the Radar.
Remember to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You can support the show by donating to us on Patreon. Search for Over Under on patreon.com.
And you can message us on our socials at over_under_pod_ or email us at info@overunderpod.com.